With Xanathar's Guide to Everything, a lot more was added to the original 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. Unlike campaign extension books like Sword Coast or Waterdeep, Xanathar's is meant to be a player's handbook 2.0 when it comes to adding features to any campaign. But was it better for the overall balance of the game, or did it bring more harm than good? Let's analyze that today. Hey everyone, we're back for another D&D video. The last one did just well enough to justify a second video, so here it is. Alright, time for the disclaimers. Once again, we're dealing with 5th edition, and 5th edition only. Also, I'm not saying that you should or should not pick a certain class or archetype to play a certain way. For players who don't necessarily care so much about being really powerful, this video may not apply to you. But I know there are a lot of players out there that want not only a good story, but to do cool shit in combat and feel good doing it. Next, I'm not trying to bash Wizards of the Coast. I think they did a fantastic job on the game. That said, I am going to throw a few criticisms their way. I'm going to try and make them as constructive as possible. This topic inevitably has a negative tone to it, but I want to try and mitigate that. Lastly, I welcome all forms of discussion in my comment section. If there's something you do or don't like about my videos, let me know. Now, with that out of the way, let's start talking about how balanced 5th edition is. We need to start with how the original was before we talk about Xanathar's Guide to Everything. Honestly, I think vanilla 5e was pretty balanced. I know a lot of people considered spellcasters as top tier, but I don't really see it that way. You get a lot more sustainability as a melee class. Your attacks don't waste slots, and will outdamage cantrips, sans maybe Eldritch Blast. Your HP will tend to be higher, and you will definitely have a higher AC. And then, certain melee classes get shit like Evasion to counter Dex save AoE spells. Essentially, a rogue, monk, or hunter could potentially take 0 damage against Meteor Swarm. And most of the melee classes can optionally get some spells, or any class if the player takes Magic Initiate. Within the spellcaster set, there are clear advantages and disadvantages to taking each one. As a wizard, you have a wide range of arcane magic at your disposal. You can technically have every wizard spell in your spellbook, and prepare whichever combination within your limits each day. You pick a school of magic to focus on, and make even more useful to you. However, you are a bit of a straight shooter in that regard. There aren't many in-class options to increase the power of your abilities outside your school of magic. Contrasting with that, you have the Sorcerer. Sorcerers trade versatility for raw power. Unlike the Wizard, you can bend any school of magic to your will, and make them stronger, faster, or potentially double its effect. Although you have fewer options than the Wizard, you have greater mastery than the Wizard with the spells you do have. As I mentioned, you don't have much variety, and the biggest downside is that you learn your spells as opposed to preparing them, so once you set your spells you can't change them until you level up again. Bards are the most versatile caster because of magical secrets and jack-of-all-trades. You have access to light armor and get a d8 hit die, which makes you a bit hardier than the previous two. You can even dabble in melee combat through College of Valor, although I think lore is much better. What bards trade for versatility is power. As a bard, you don't have any way of empowering the spells you have. At the very least, the wizard can make their specific school of magic more powerful. When in contention, most people say that the sorcerer is significantly worse than the other two. I say that's a hot garbage take. I know that immediately throws shade on YouTubers who have said this opinion in the past. I'm not trying to, but this topic does require treading over other opinions. For one, I need to mention the spellcasting modifier. The wizard uses intelligence, which is good for investigation, arcana, etc. That's nice, but when it comes to multiclassing, they don't really gel with the other spellcasting types, and really only do well with Eldritch Knight and Arcane Trickster. Sorcerer is based on Charisma, which is the most used spellcasting modifier in the game. So already, it helps with multiclassing with Bard or Warlock or Paladin. So when it comes to Bard versus Sorcerer and multiclassing, both are very good. However, I think when it comes to how abilities gel with other classes, it comes down to whether you want power or versatility. With Bard, you can be kinda good at everything while multiclassing. With Sorcerer, you can deal a boatload of damage in one round while multiclassing. Take 5 Sorcerer, 5 Paladin, for instance. You can cast a 3rd level spell like Fireball, Lightning Bolt, or a 3rd level Scorching Ray, and then quicken it. Then, as your action, you attack twice and can smite both times. At that rate, you're out-damaging anything a bard can do, multi-class or not. You can take Sorcerer and any fighter archetype and then cast a decent-sized spell and then attack up to 3 times as your action. Quicken spell alone makes multiclassing extremely powerful for a sorcerer. By the way, when you use metamagic, you can use it on spells that you gain from multiclassing. So if you went Sorcerer Cleric, you can twin or distant heal. Of course, as we'll later talk about, you don't really have to do that anymore with Divine Soul. Moving on, Druid is powerful, but it does sacrifice some damaging spells in order to get some powerful shape-shifting abilities. I don't mention it in the same vein as Bard, Wizard, and Sorcerer, because they're a lot different in terms of abilities. Archdruid is broken though, especially as a Moon Druid, but at least it's a level 20 ability, and not early on. Cleric is wonderfully done in this game. It's great at healing, but doesn't lock you in. You still do a lot of damage. I think in terms of the versatility and power scale, it's somewhere in the middle. Warlock is a weird one. You don't get much in the way of spell slots, but you get some really cool abilities called invocations that can make you kinda like a 3/4 caster. I use that terminology when you consider how multiclassing adds up to your caster levels. Ranger and Paladin are half casters, while the other spellcasters are full casters. I think in terms of spellcasting, Warlocks do more than your half casters because of Mystic Arcanum and the quicker route to 5th level spells, but not as much as the full casters. Of course, the multiclassing rules don't clarify this because Warlock slots are separate from everything else, making them the true outlier. You can focus on melee as a Warlock, which is nice, or you can focus more on spellcasting. They get light armor as well, which is nice. They fit in the balance of the game as cantrip-slinging beasts that can sometimes challenge full casters in terms of power. When it comes to melee classes, the balance is still there, but to a lesser extent. Fighter, Barbarian, and Rogue have an interesting relationship. Unlike the versatility and power scale, it's more of a number of hits versus damage per hit scale. Kind of. At 5th level, a Berserker Barbarian can have 3 attacks with a Frenzied Rage, and will do more damage per hit than a fighter, but a Battlemaster can make up for it with some maneuvers or Action Surge, increasing the number of hits up to 4, at least once per short rest. But once the fighter gets that 3rd attack, then the Battlemaster can start doing more damage per round than a Berserker on average. But in return, the Barbarian takes less damage and gets a higher HP pool generally speaking. Rogues get the least number of attacks, but the sneak attack gradually improves over time, doing the most amount of damage in one hit, which also, of course, improves the crit, especially if you choose Assassin. They also have more utility outside of combat than the previous two. Monks can do a lot of hits, but do less damage per hit than the previous 3. They have a lot of options as a trade for raw power. You can do things like reduce falling damage, catch missiles, evade AoE, stun an opponent, or knock them prone, or teleport within shadow. They have a lot at their disposal for all-around adventuring. Paladins are nuts. They're optimized fiend and undead killers. They can do a shitload of damage very quickly at the cost of their small resource pool. At level 2, Paladin has the highest max damage possible. If you use Thunderous Smite as your bonus action, hit with a Great Axe, and crit, and use your Divine Smite, that's 2d12 plus 46 plus 48, or 68 if Fiend are undead, plus your Strength modifier. Let's say plus 4 for the sake of argument. That's a max damage of 84 regular, or 100 damage if Fiend are undead, at level 2. Granted, after that, your Paladin is just a glorified level 1 fighter with just a few divine powers. But it's just a showcase of how Paladins trade versatility for absolute power. A lot of people find Paladins busted. I think Paladins are more like temporarily busted units. Early on, Paladins have to really manage their resources wisely, because they are very, very limited. Later on, they have a lot more breathing room, and a nice lay on hands pool. But by that point, most classes have their own abilities that can keep up. Obviously, the least balanced part of Vanilla 5e was the Ranger. Most people seem to agree that the Ranger got shafted, especially the Beastmaster. The Ranger does have some cool abilities that help adventuring along, but the Rogue can do that stuff better because of expertise. Ranger Rogue multiclass is pretty nice, but you shouldn't have to dip into Rogue just to be a better Ranger. I will say Hunter is not bad. You get some nice abilities with Hunter like Colossus Slayer. That can definitely make a crit do a lot of damage, especially if you have Hunter's Mark active. The biggest issue with Ranger is that there are few clear rewards for being a solo class. Although you can gain access to 5th level spells, you're better off multi-classing. Even taking 1 to 3 levels in Rogue can drastically enhance your Ranger for the better. Meanwhile, you can take Rogue to 20 and have it be great from start to finish. So now let's talk about how Xanathar has affected this overall balance. Spell-wise, I don't think it added too much in the way of shifting one class better or worse. I think one significant thing I can think of is Toll the Dead, but even then, I wouldn't consider it any better than, say, Firebolt. So overall, I'd say well done on their part. The first thing I want to address is the Divine Soul Sorcerer. So not only does the Sorcerer have the power edge on the other spellcasting classes, but now the Sorcerer outdoes the Wizard in versatility now too. The DSS can out-heal a Cleric with Twin Spell. Have two party members unconscious and don't know which one to choose? Oh wait, you don't have to. Twinned Healing Word. Want to do a substantial heal and attack in the same turn? Sure. You can do a high level Cure Wounds and then quicken it so that you can use a cantrip to attack. I suppose you could also use Distance Spell to make a Cure Wounds a 30-foot range instead of touch if you want. Favored by the Gods is a ridiculous first level ability. By the way, a DSS can fly as a bonus action at 14th level. It's a free fly, although it's not as fast as fly. But the thing is, it just lasts indefinitely until you either get incapacitated, die, or dismiss them as a bonus action. The 18th level ability to recover up to half your max HP is crazy. That's a bonus action heal, by the way. Before I move on from DSS, I want to back something up real quick because I can see the response already about Twinned Healing Word. Yeah, but PentSage, you only heal 1d4 plus Charisma modifier. That's barely anything. Yes, but getting a party member out of that 0 HP state is crucial, depending on the situation. You might have two members with 2 failed death saves each. You might have two members with enemies about to kill them. Also, if their turn comes up soon before the enemies, you just granted them both the ability to act instead of just wasting their turns rolling death saves. And besides, if the enemy is going to hit a certain amount of damage, like say 15 or higher per hit, and maybe has a multi-attack, it's better than just doing a first level Cure Wounds, which may only do up to like 12 or 13 healing, and they just get downed in one strike regardless of whether you were healing like 7 or 13. So yeah, the bonus action is huge in that case, and also the range. In terms of ranger archetypes, the Gloomstalker and Horizon Walker are nice. They give us more options at a viable ranger that can stand up to Hunter. However, I do think they should have focused more on making Beastmaster more viable rather than leaving it in the dust. I think Tasha's Cauldron of Everything is going to buff the Beastmaster, from what I hear. I guess we'll have to wait and see. Rogue archetypes overall are good, but there are two things that I take issue with. A lot of these newer archetypes try to minimize the requirements for sneak attack and even increase its damage. I think they could have done better with that. The other thing I don't like is that the scout is a big fuck you to the ranger. As a scout, you automatically get expertise in survival and nature, which is supposed to be the ranger's shtick. Only the ranger doesn't get expertise. So once again, the rogue outrangers the ranger. Scout should have been a ranger archetype. You would have to modify the 17th level ability Sudden Strike, but you could just have it do extra damage instead of, proccing sneak attack. You could have even thrown in a proficiency to stealth in the scout if it was given to the ranger instead. The skirmisher ability also fits well under a ranger if you're an archer, because you would naturally want to keep enemies away from you. The Hexblade Warlock is freaking amazing. I absolutely love it. It adds an extra dimension to melee combat as a Pact of Blade Lock, and has some really cool lore implications, as seen on Critical Role Campaign 2. The Celestial is a much less powerful version of the Divine Soul Sorcerer. Unlike DSS, I don't think Celestial is breaking, as Warlocks still have limited spell slots, and the Celestial doesn't expand the Warlock spell list beyond normal. It only improves its versatility a little, and adds some nice healing abilities as well. With Fighter, I don't think the new types did anything to shift the balance. Arcane Archer is pretty fucking cool. It could have been a Ranger archetype, although I think it's far less of an issue than Scout. Archery isn't exclusive to Ranger, nor should it be. Now that I think of it, I actually kind of like it on Fighter as a multi-class option with Ranger. The others are okay, and none of them are really any better than Battlemaster. The new Barbarian types add some more options to the table, but I don't think any of them are broken, which is good. They can add a little more damage to you, but still the Berserker has that frenzied attack, and the Totem Bearer is still the tankiest. Overall, thumbs up. As far as Druids go, Circle of the Moon is still the most powerful, although Land can be circumstantially as good. Perhaps they should have spent a little bit more time buffing weaker archetypes and Xanathars rather than adding new ones. Monk archetypes don't really affect the balance of the game either. They're all pretty unique, but don't go above open hand in terms of power. Once again, thumbs up. Paladin archetypes are pretty much the same. They add more variety to the game, with different channeled divinities and spells, but they don't go beyond Oath of Vengeance powerful. I think it was smart of them not to add any subclasses for Wizard. They are just fine how they are. The Critical Role content is fine, but I don't necessarily need it to feel fulfilled as a Wizard. College of Swords is what College of Valor should have been, so I'm very glad they made melee bards a bit more viable. In the overall scheme of things, Divine Soul Sorcerer becomes the absolute best caster, in my opinion. As a result, the Cleric is devalued, although they aren't obsolete or underpowered in the least bit. I think while the Ranger has gotten some more options, their overall place in the balance of the game has actually gone down because of the Scout and lack of Beastmaster buffs, giving less incentive to play a Ranger over a Rogue. The Warlock is better at molding into just about any party, which gives it a minor buff in my opinion, a good and welcome buff to me. Bards get better options, but don't really gain any more power on the wizard, so that's good. Overall, I'd say the game is less balanced than it was before, but it's far from completely busted. One of the running themes here is that some of the archetypes that were less powerful in vanilla 5e became even worse overall. This is unfortunately a pitfall that game designers fall into in any game with updates. Esports players understand this quite well. Designers can tend to get overzealous to add new exciting content and forget about the old. Even when they don't, it's not always clear how to balance the new with the old. How many competitive games have come out with new characters in them being immediately at the top of the meta? Just to name a few, Smash Ultimate at least twice, Overwatch, Street Fighter 4 and 5, Marvel vs. Capcom 3, and so many more. So I can't exactly blame Wizards for not being fully aware of how this would shake things up. The ones I blame are the people who gave bad feedback to them during the Unearthed Arcana phase of Xanathar's material, but still, it's not all that bad. At least every class is still viable, and multiclassing is great at making up for imbalances in one class. So that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed, and thanks for watching. Monk archetypes don't really affect the balance of the game. Don't affect the balance of the game either. Monk archetypes don't really affect archetypes. Fucking hell.